I want to hear your thoughts on this. Are the assisted dying adverts right or wrong? This Friday, MPs will head to the Commons to vote on a bill that would legalise assisted dying. And in the run-up, people have been spotting posters put up by a campaign group, Dignity in Dying. Now, they say that they have been spreading their message far and wide on billboards in newspapers and online. However, some people say that the images glorify suicide. That's what they say. In some stations, they've already been covered up with suicide prevention posters, although it's not quite clear who's putting them up either. So how would you feel if you'd spotted them out and about? Do you think they're insensitive, tasteless, or do you agree with their message and actually think it's important to draw attention to it? 0207 862 2222 for your view on this. Emily, have you seen any of these adverts pop up?
I have. I've seen them on the approach to in Westminster Tube Station, because obviously that's where a lot of the MPs and a lot of the civil servants are getting off to go to the House of Parliament. So I don't have any problem with these adverts. There's two issues here, Storm. One is the assisted dying bill, of which more in a moment. But the other, it's freedom of speech. We live in a country where freedom of speech is, protected. I know it's a big political football right now, but this advertising campaign is advertising choice. That's all it's saying. It's advertising choice. That's not offensive. They're not, they are not telling people to go and commit suicide. It's a complete misnomer to say that. We have freedom of speech in this country, and pertinently, TfL have said that they do not breach any advertising rules within their underground stations. The second point about assisted dying, this is not trying to legalise suicide or legalise dying. This is to give people choice. I have personal experience of this with my father, and even if this bill passes in the next reading on Friday, this is not. No one has to make use of it. Nobody has to choose to use this law. It is just there if people want it. It's a judge who makes a decision on people who are terminally ill. There's a 14-day calling off period. It's a 3-week position. And this is not telling people that if they are terminally ill, they have to die. Quite the opposite. It's to give people choice, which they do not have at the moment.
Going away from the bill itself, though, and back to the adverts, interesting to put up adverts about a bill that's going through the House of Commons that the general public aren't even going to get a vote on. What do you think the purpose of that is, Lynn?
I think it's quite sinister, to be honest with you.
Sinister?
Yeah, I think it's
just lobbying.
No, I think
it is just lobbying. But what's the difference between lobbying any other MP?
Sometimes lobbying can be sinister. And I think, OK, this is a very serious decision that MPs have to make within the own confines of their own moral compass. We know what marketing machines do to our psyche. There's so much research to know that you may have gone into a shop only for a bottle of milk and you've come out with 5 or 10 things because the advertising that is pumped into our brains visually that tells us we need things that we don't need. And what this does, let me finish. And this is also with me having a family member who has repeatedly said he does not want to live anymore. Now, my thing is, those who want to benefit if you want to call it that, from this bill, if it gets passed, they already have done the research. They're waiting for the bill to be passed. They haven't had to have advertising to tell them, do I need assisted dying? What these ads do is it normalises it. And if we continue to see these ads, people will have these ingrained in them to think, I'm having a really rubbish few months.
This advert is about choice.
I want to be able to have the choice.
A judge wouldn't pass that.
A judge wouldn't do.
There are guardrails. There are guardrails. No, there are guardrails. A judge
for now
is he or she
for now
is
what I'm saying
impartial,
is
someone who looks.
Okay, hold on. You're talking over each other. Lynn, finish your point, and then you can come in with the guards.
My point is, this is where it begins. I am in support to a degree of this bill. However, if we start to see advertising, you can now benefit from assisted dying. We'll get more drumming up of support. At what point do we stop? And we've seen in other countries that benefit from assisted dying, there are young people that have actually taken their lives because of depression. Now, we're not there yet, but what advertising does is it normalises things of this nature. And people who want to benefit from the assisted dying do not need to see an advert to get them to want to do that.
This is not about getting someone or persuading someone to want to do something.
Advertising is persuasion. Marketing is persuasion.
This is lobbying and it's a campaign group, Dignity in Dying, who are just putting out an advert saying that I want choice. That's what it says. The words,
and you will have choice with
my
the
dying
bill.
wish. It says that all it says.
Why do we need to see it? Why do we need to see it?
Well, that's a different point, isn't it? That's a different point. Why do we need to see it? It's the people who are walking through Westminster Tube Station, and it's the MPs who have to make a decision on Friday about which way they're going to go.
But the organisation said that they want to promote this conversation far and wide, so outside of Westminster.
And
but I suppose
it's
trying to sway the MPs as well. It's trying to sway their decision.
I think this is where you two disagree, is on the intention behind the advert. Emily, you very much see it as opening a conversation and trying to get the public involved in that conversation and maybe put pressure on the MPs in order to vote a certain way. Lynn, you very much see it as encouraging people on the policy itself and the bill itself rather than...
the Act itself.
Well, the Act itself
they
rather than the bill.
Persuaded with ads.
OK, stay with us because I do want to hear from you after the break. Now we're going back to assisted dying and the adverts that are popping up over the country, whether they're right or wrong. And we're going to speak to Angela now from Derbyshire. Angela, how do you feel about advertising a bill? It's an odd one. I can't think of another example when this has happened.
I can't. I do think it's wrong. I think the ones that I've seen, they've been very much about, they've been young people, youngish people on these adverts. And I just find it strange how in a way, given the chance, it's saying that we've got the right to decide when we die. And it makes it look too easy. And I just think how death should be a natural process and something that should be, that it's part of a whole family, people around you, and it should just be done dignified, don't get me wrong, it should, but we used to have a thing called the Liverpool Care Pathway, and I do believe that if that was reintroduced but in a better way than what it was, I do think that could be a lot better. I had to see my mum die in 2002 and it was very traumatic. However, I understand grief now through what I felt then, and without that, if I thought that she had gone and done what this could possibly do now, I think I would have felt robbed of not seeing that and not knowing the process of what we went through, what she went through, because I was able to see that she was no longer in pain. And yeah, she suffered, but she was a fighter and she was a warrior and she fought so hard, cancer. And although, of course, she passed away, but she was no longer in pain. And that process, that ending, is so important. And I just feel sometimes we always want
Angela,
the quickest way out.
My greatest sympathies for you, and I totally understand that if you have a loved one that made the decision, if this bill gets passed, that makes the decision to go for assisted dying, that you might feel robbed. But I suppose the question then is that your decision to make? Surely your life is your choice and your decision on how you want to do it, and that's something that we want to avoid actually with the assisted dying bill is families having too much of an input in it in the negative sense. I wonder whether, Angela, when you see the posters, you say that it makes it look too easy, and that's interesting because I suppose that is what they want to demonstrate, is that death doesn't have to be undignified, it doesn't have to be painful, it doesn't have to be hard, you don't have to go through that process for months and months and years sometimes on end. But
you can only apply in the last 6 months, and you have to then, when you go to the High Court, you have to wait 14 days then before you can do anything about it. And I suffered from depression up until 2016, and as soon as I found out that they allowed people with mental health illnesses to do that and they could go to Dignitas, that to me, I was then looking into it, I was researching everything, and when will that happen over here?
Are you worried then actually it'll be a slippery slope? Because at the moment I don't think mental health illness is in there, because you don't get 6 months, do you, for a mental health illness?
Well, no, exactly, but it didn't matter. It's a long time debilitating, regardless. I don't mean here, I mean over there.
Yeah.
And for me, it just, what next? And I'm proof that, and I'm so pleased I never did it, but I could have done, and I won't be here to say, you know what, it does get better.
Well, we're very glad that you didn't either, Angela. Thank you very much for your call. Carol from London, how do you feel about these adverts? Well, have you seen one around?
I haven't seen one, but I believe then I haven't seen one, and I have been on the trains, and I haven't seen them in my face.
Okay.
But I can't believe that they're all over the place. I mean, we're talking specifically about the ads, and it's up to us whether we look at specific ads. I mean, we have adverts for food, for other things that I don't particularly like. It's my choice whether I look at it or not. And, you know, it's our choice. When it comes down to it, assisted dying is our individual choice. It's not someone else making the decision for us.
But Carol, if you have a look, sorry to interject there, Carol, if you have a look at the research around marketing and advertising, you may think that you are blocking out certain ads, but you even resting your eyes for a few seconds and that having an impact on your subconscious can actually tell you that you want something when you don't really want something. And we're seeing increasingly it's harder for us to make that decision against advertising.
But you're suggesting that people that don't have a terminal illness are looking at that and being encouraged to take their own lives because of it?
I can give you something even more simplistic. There are many women who would have never dreamed of pumping up their lips. They keep on seeing advertising or longer lashes. They were happy with short lashes up until 10 years ago. We now see many women with really long lashes. Why? Because of the advertising, because of the normalisation. If you would have told someone 10 to 15 years ago that many young girls would have huge duck-looking lips, you would laugh at them. It's been normalised. And something of this magnitude...
Is that not fashion? Though that sort of comes and goes.
But fashion can come in many ways. Even as the previous caller said, these are people on the ads that look very young. A person with a cycling helmet on, energetic, a girl jumping up dancing. The typeface is pink, it's colourful. They're normalising. If I feel rough, I'm not saying this is accepted in this current bill.
Well, one of them has terminal breast cancer.
But it's a slippery road eventually that can normalise this is an easy way out.
I don't think that's right. I think Carol's got a very good point. You know, we choose what we, you know, imbibe or we choose to what we're influenced by. We're all very savvy now about advertising. We know how advertising works. We know how, you know, in terms of social media or newspapers or television, we understand about product placement, even in our favourite TV shows. We're all pretty savvy, I think, and that's even before you get people to like judges or MPs who are going to have the responsibility to decide on all of these things. And the whole thing about, you know, I'm sorry, Lynn, I think it's just absolutely ridiculous that you're suggesting that people might be influenced to go and, you know, go down the path, because it's only for people with a terminal illness. It's only for people
now
who have. But
is there value? I see if the assisted dying bill passes and it becomes something that people can access, then maybe constant advertising and letting people know that it is an option might be seen as encouraging people to take that option. But as it stands, that's not the situation. But do you see any positives in these posters, even the fact we're talking about it on air now, opening up the conversation about assisted dying, about the drawbacks of assisted dying, about the difficulties in putting that policy in place, and about the safeguards that must be in place if we were to make this a law?
I think people who need to have that conversation, the conversation is open, and that's why the bill is being tabled. The issue is where it becomes a household conversation of where it now is the gateway. We often talk about the normalisation of legalising cannabis. Why has many people said let's not do that? Because it's a gateway drug potentially.
I think those comparisons are completely invidious.
Well, no,
we're talking about death. We're talking about death.
I'm giving you an example of what the gateway.
Death is a certainty.
We have to look.
And I think culturally we need to think more about how we look at death, because I think we've moved from a situation like in Victorian England. Obviously, you know, death was habitually, you know, and women had lots and lots of babies because, you know, infant mortality was high, adult mortality was high. We've moved to a situation through the wonder of science and the NHS where we prioritise living above everything else. And I do think we need to have more of a conversation about what death is, about what dying is, and how we manage that in our families.
The reason why this bill has such safeguards, like 6 months, like a judge, like 2 doctors, is because this conversation has not been hugely across the board in society normalised. When you normalise it...
No, the conversation hasn't been normalised, so we need to talk about it more.
The next time, it's going to be less and less safeguarding because it's seen as a normal. Oh, yeah, I had a neighbour who just opted for taking their own life with assisted dying bill. It's now normality. It's a gateway.
I think up until Friday, tomorrow, next day, we're going to be talking more about this probably, and we'll see how that vote goes on Friday, but we are going to have to move on. I want your calls on this.